All right, so today I wanted to start off by talking about a very interesting story, nonetheless, in that from Global News titled Alberta has reported zero cases of influenza so far this season. And getting into it, there have been no lab confirmed cases of influenza reported in Alberta so far this season. Weekly data released by AHS. Let's see if there's um, anything actually worth talking about here. To compare this year's numbers to last, by November 8th, 2019, there were 139 cases. Um, Going back another year, there was 920. So again, um, I don't think it's possible. I think that there's clearly some shady stuff going on here. Because there's no possible way there's no cases of the flu. Now, it may be as simple as the government just saying, we don't care about the flu, we're not going to test for the flu. All we're worried about is the other one, right? The one that everyone's all paranoid about. That may be the case. I mean, it would be nice if they could just tell us that. So again, I don't really know. Are they including the flu for the virus cases? That's possible as well. But again, it's very interesting because again, like whenever you see numbers like this, the first thing I think to myself is, or one of the first things, it's well, number one, the first thing would be how is that even possible, and number two is how does the average person see headlines like this and not question the narrative when it comes to this whole virus situation? Like, how do you see this and not wonder like, hey, have we been lied to up until this point? Like, how is that even possible? Like I said, and the fact that most people don't do that, I think, just goes to show that most people really aren't paying attention at all, like really at all. So yeah, I wish that they would come up with a legitimate reason for this. Again, maybe they have, I don't know. Um, Dr. Grace Salvo, a medical officer of AHS, said the data doesn't necessarily mean there's no influenza circulating. Well, that's beyond obvious. She stressed that every season the flu comes at different times, so it's only a matter of time before we start seeing it in our population. So again, that must mean that they are testing for it then, because she wouldn't say something like that if they weren't testing for it, I think. Um, every year the influenza changes a little bit, and that's why every year people need to get revaccinated. Yeah, I don't think so. So we're expecting that eventually influenza will come as it comes every year, and it'll probably be a little bit different than last year. Again, what does that mean? I don't know, because she doesn't directly say it there, but what she is implying is that they are keeping an eye out for the flu, and they are testing for it, because if they weren't testing for it, she would have said that. And here's what I think is going to happen is, I mean, number one, they may just be including flu cases in as virus cases. That's possible. The other possibility may be they're just not testing for it right now, and or at the very least they're just not really paying attention. Maybe they're testing for it, but they don't really care about it. And when it does come, like she says here, that's going to give them another excuse to clamp down even more, because oh, we got the virus situation, now we got the flu, we got to shut it all down, shut everything down, or we're all going to die, right? So again, that's kind of what I would predict is when the flu does hit, which again, I think it probably has already hit. I mean, I don't see how we can have hundreds of cases every year up until this point, going back the last every year, and not have any cases. Like, that's such a statistical anomaly. I don't even think it's possible. Um, but again, technically it is possible, but the likelihood is so low that I don't believe it, and it's too much of a coincidence that it just happened to happen um, during this whole virus situation. Like, why hasn't it happened in other years, right? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So that basically what I think is what's going to happen here is, I mean, either they're just not going to test for them, and they're just never there's never going to be any flu cases, or maybe they'll come up with some, but there'll be a lot less, because if there's literally zero flu cases going up until the spring, then that's going to be a little too obvious that there's some shady stuff going on. So they'll probably come up with some. It'll probably be a lot less than normal. They're probably including flu cases in virus numbers. That's probably happening. But what's probably going to happen is that if there is this flu wave, like she talks about, they're just going to use that as another excuse to clamp down. So that's basically, and here's the thing too. I think that the whole shutdown that they just implemented yesterday, I think that that's going to be used as an excuse to clamp down even more, because we know that these lockdown measures, they don't do anything to slow the spread, because number one, when it comes to the numbers, the case numbers are completely irrelevant. The case numbers are completely irrelevant, for many reasons. I mean, number one being they're not actually testing for the virus; they're simply amplifying material to have an. It's basically an educated guess, right? It's basically an educated guess. And the other problem with that too is that when you go above 25 to 30 cycles, which every province is at like 35 to 40, so every province is in the territory to where a lot of the positive tests, you're going to be getting false positives. And speaking of that, Elon Musk here tweeted out the other day saying something extremely bogus is going on. Was tested for the virus 4 times today. 2 came back negative, 2 came back positive. Same machine, same test, same nurse, sorry. Rapid antigen test from BD. Now again, I don't know how people can see stuff like this and not question the narrative. I really don't. Because I mean, here's the thing. The reality is that people have made their mind up on this kind of stuff, and no amount of information is going to change their minds. Like, no amount of information is going to change their minds. Like, when we first got into this situation, yeah, I was worried about some cases, right? But then I started looking into the science behind some of this kind of stuff, and then he's like, yeah, cases don't matter. And heck, even deaths to some degree don't matter, because it's not that they don't matter, they just don't matter as much as people think that they do, I guess is a better way of putting it. In that, number one, a lot of the cases are false positives. Number two, if it's an asymptomatic case, it really doesn't matter, because the likelihood of the spread is incredibly low. And that's, again, according to people like Dr. Fauci. That's not according, that's just not just my opinion. Again, so the things that we should be worried about are symptomatic cases and deaths of people that are actually being killed by the virus, not someone in their 80s, not someone with severe comorbidities, right? I'm waiting for what it would take to get me paranoid about this whole virus situation. This is probably something that people are wondering, is if we have very healthy people who are not senior citizens who are dying from this and or having very severe symptoms. But I've seen next to no cases of that. There has been a handful of cases of that, but nothing significant. So again, if people are wondering what it would take to change my mind on the topic, would be something like that. And given the fact that we're 8 months into this already, 9, 10 months if you include the numbers coming out of China, I mean even a little more, it's not something that's going to happen. It's highly unlikely. And this is the thing too, that I don't understand this paranoia when it comes around the testing. I really don't understand it, because like I said, the test numbers are completely unreliable. You have numbers showing 20, 30% of positives are false positives. I've seen up numbers saying upwards of half. And again, considering Elon Musk's case here, that kind of shows that. And this is the problem too, that how do you, I don't, the other thing too is that the the tests that they do, they can't tell the difference between you being sick right now or you being sick in the past. They can't tell the difference between you having a bad cold or you having the virus. I don't even know if they can tell the difference between the flu. And this is the problem too, that the PCR tests, they amplify it way too much. So you can discover pretty much everything. In other words, if you have the PCR test and you amplify it enough, everybody would be positive. Eventually, there would be a point where literally everybody would be positive, because that's what it's designed to do. And then again, there's a lot of science that goes in behind this. There's one doctor will tell you this, another doctor will tell you that, but the people that I trust have been very clear in saying that if you amplify it more than 25 to 30 times, you're going to get a lot of false positives, like an alarming amount of false positives. And if, like I say, every province is in that 35 to 40 range, which means many of the cases, the positive cases, are going to be false positives. So that's something that people really need to keep an eye out for. That when they hear, oh, there's X amount of cases, you have to think probably 20-30% of those are false positives, and probably another 20 to 30% are asymptomatic cases. In reality, the majority of cases that are being discovered are either complete bogus or people that have nothing to worry about. So anyway, the next thing to talk about here is from Rocco Galati, and again, another thing, the very interesting point, I guess, here, and he says, Statistics Canada, and when I look at the numbers for Ontario, all-cause deaths, I think another word for that would be all-cause mortality, and he does February through July of 2019 and 2020, and sure enough, more people died in 2019 than 2020. So again, um, this is just another piece of evidence that shows that why are we being so paranoid about this situation? Why are we being so paranoid? Less people are dying. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, and the last thing to bring up here is from Tom Quiggin. So Jagmeet Singh tweeted out on November 10th, there are 300 plus white supremacist and neo World War II German groups operating in Canada. Today, a bunch of groups, and I called on Justin Trudeau to establish a national action plan to dismantle them. Canadians have a right to feel safe. Stand up with us, NDP. Now, again, you don't have a right to feel safe because if that's your right, like what if my ability to feel safe is I want an army of people to protect me. Like that's not realistic. So again, you don't have a right to feel safe. You have a right to reasonable. It has to be reasonable, right? And the big problem with this, number one, is that I mean Tom Quiggin points out here any evidence for this. Public Safety Canada lists only two. That means there's a spread of 298 between you and what the government actually says. By the way, why were you banned from entering India? Did they believe you supported terrorism and that's why you're banned? Now again, I mean, for all the people that don't know, Jagmeet Singh is banned from India, and the reasons that I've heard is, I mean, there has to be a reason for it, and the most likely one is that he refuses to condemn a terrorist attack that killed, I don't know how many people it killed, but nonetheless, the group that carried it out is a Sikh nationalist group, I believe, and Jagmeet Singh refuses to condemn that. So again, Jagmeet Singh worried about all this terrorism and ooh, they're gonna get you, even though he's the one. Like just imagine if someone refused to condemn like the act of 9/11 or something like that. Like you'd be raked over the coals. But again, Jagmeet Singh does it and nobody cares. And the other thing that he does too is he just blatantly lies and that he claims there's 300 white supremacist groups when Public Safety Canada says two. Like I don't know where he gets that number from, but I mean there's no way there's 300 plus. Like not a chance. Like I can't even name one of them, right? And if you talk to the average person, like what percentage of people do you think could name a white supremacist group operating in Canada, other than maybe the KKK? I don't know if they exist in Canada or not. Honestly, I have no idea. But aside from that, could we name one? I think 99.9% of people couldn't do it. So I think that just goes to show that old Jagmeet Singh. I mean, again, the goal of this is just to race bait. That's what these far leftists love doing. That's basically why they exist, is to race bait, and that's basically their job. We're gonna race bait, and that's how they keep and gain support. Again, Jagmeet Singh's in a very vulnerable position right now, in that the party has lost a lot of support. They're flat broke, and they have the power to overthrow the government, but yet they don't do it. So again, he's in a pretty bad position right now. So he constantly has to deflect by doing stuff like this, and like he tweeted out the other day going after Trump, making a bunch of stuff up. Again, it's just complete garbage. I don't know how people take this these kind of people seriously. So anyway, if you like the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. If you haven't already, make sure you follow me on Twitter, Parler, BitChute. All those links are in the description. If you want to donate, you can do that as well. But like I said, at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.